solutions in the public sector for IBM, and it has many years of experience in many areas of IT and business, and we're very happy to have her here and share with us her experience and the examples of what companies are doing, and companies that many of them are clients of IBM.
Great, thank you very much. So I got to say hello to most of you, but not all of you. So it's a real pleasure to be with you today. And I know it's Friday, and I know it's lunchtime, and I know this is probably the last place in the world you want to be. So my job is to make this interesting. And the way it's going to be interesting is if you help me. And what I mean by that is I want it to be interactive. I want you to challenge me. I want you to ask me questions. If you don't ask me questions, I'm going to ask you questions. Because that's what my professors used to do when I was here. I don't think I ever had class in this classroom, but I had class in many classrooms. I am a Fordham alumna. I went to the undergraduate school here at Rose Hill, and I got a degree in psychology. Now you have to be asking yourself, well, wait a minute. She had a degree in psychology, and she ended up working for IBM as vice president. And by the way, I've been at IBM for 25 years, so almost my entire career has been here. And the reason is because knowing human behavior, knowing and understanding how people think is very much a part of how you create a set of systems and technologies to support that behavior. Or, if you want to change that behavior, understanding how people think and behave is really an important part of figuring out how to change the behavior. So, I brought a skill to the table that was kind of unusual for IBM, and each of you will also figure out kind of the skills that you're going to bring to the table at the companies that you end up working for, or the cities that you end up supporting, or whatever it is that you choose to do in your life to make a difference. What I wanted to do today was I wanted to help you understand a little bit about how you take technology, which is what you guys are learning a lot about, systems development, database development. We got some people here looking at databases, and figure out how that actually changes business. Because at the end of the day, if you're only focused on technology's fun, and it's exciting, and I like to write code, and I like to play with social networks, it actually doesn't do you any good if it's not really having an effect on the world. So a few years ago, IBM stepped back and said, you know, we're very, very good at technology, but we want to change the world. We don't just want to build technology. It's fun, but you can build a lot of interesting things and no one will buy it because it's not solving the world's problems. So we embarked on a strategy called Smarter Planet. What do you think Smarter Planet means? If you were to define Smarter Planet, what might you define it as? Yeah.
I saw the commercials for it.
Great.
Running things more efficiently.
Right. Efficiencies. Like what? Like what could be run more efficiently?
Power consumption.
Absolutely. Right. We have an energy problem. Do we not? We have huge energy problems. So how do you solve the world's energy problem? How do you make that part of the planet smarter? That's an excellent example. Anybody else want to throw out another example? I'm going to show you a bunch, but I'm just trying to get your wheels turning a little bit here. What else could you make smart? Yep.
Utilizing data and making assumptions about those data that you can then go out and actually change the way we've been operating based on the inferences and the instances that we can make from the things that we've collected.
That's a really good point. Data is actually a fundamental factor in thinking about making things smarter. If you look at data, everything at the end falls into two categories. The data that you have, how good it is, and how you're able to do things with it, and the business processes that support the use of that data. And I know you guys are spending some time on business process management, and I'm going to talk to you about what some companies are doing about completely overhauling their business processes, and in many ways, they're doing that through the use of data, or what we would call data analytics. Now, give me an example of a company or an issue in the world that might be a data problem. Can you think of one? Oh, wow, it's one that you guys use every day. How many of you check your Facebook? Come on, you all do, I know she does in the back. That's a data problem for us. That's my daughter in the back. Okay, totally just embarrassed her. Sorry about that. We all have Facebook because we like to communicate with each other and learn about each other and share information about each other. Information is data-based, but it actually is a huge opportunity for us to share and learn from things that we know about each other. Isn't that comfortable? That we can actually take data about you and learn things about you. Doesn't that make you feel great? There are huge privacy issues around data and the use of data. And we're going to talk about what some of the companies are dealing with out there as it relates to access about data about you, like stuff that you put on Facebook. So data is being driven from Facebook in astronomical numbers, and I'm going to share some of those with you. Facebook creates 10 terabytes of data a day. It is the fastest growing data machine in the world, bar none. RFID tags, those are little SKUs that you guys have on probably everything. You probably have an RFID tag on your cafeteria cards and those kinds of things. These are all, RFID tags are everywhere. They're creating billions and billions of reams of data that tell us what you buy, when you buy it, what's your favorite color, who you hang out with, what you eat. We're learning everything about your behavior. Look at your mobile phone. I just heard the other day that some of the telephone companies, they didn't name which ones they were, but some of the telephone companies have software built into their mobile phone access that tracks everything that you do. Everywhere that you go, everybody that you call, every single text that you make. What do you think those companies want that data for? Yeah.
Well, I actually read the article.
But you did great, because I only saw it quickly on the news.
The company's actually Carrier IQ,
Right.
and they have the analytical software that reportedly only the manufacturers of the actual devices aren't the ones commissioning Carrier IQ, but it's actually carriers themselves.
Yeah, the telephone companies.
Because what they've stated is that they want that information to see how well their network is doing, how the users interacting with the phone, what they can do to improve the network.
You believe that?
To an extent, because with the thing with the truths, they can be skewed a little. That may be a truth. There may be more behind it, but there's also government agencies. I know Libya actually contracted some other companies to do spying on certain sects in the country to figure out what they were doing and locating rebels, for example. So
Right.
this type of software is extremely powerful.
Very powerful. You're right. And so, you could have a philosophical discussion, and if we were in philosophy class, or sociology, we'd be having a very philosophical discussion about what that data is being used for. But the fact that the data is being collected and tracked, there is a lot of truth by the fact that companies like AT&T and Verizon and others are really trying to understand network utilization. So they know your peaks and your valleys and how to charge you appropriately. More for the peaks, less for the valleys, because that's how they make their money. But we do have a data problem, and it's getting worse. And for companies out there, they are maniacally focused on this data. Now, why is that? I wanted to show this to you. This is actually a chart that I show to my clients when they're struggling. Healthcare companies are notoriously struggling about what to do with their data. They have absolutely no idea what their data is, how to leverage it. They're really very far behind in terms of really understanding and getting their arms around their data. And by the way, that data is all about us. And it's about our personal health records, and it's about everything that we do in relation to a healthcare institution. So it's a problem which has led to a significant healthcare crisis, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But when you're a company and you're not using your data, this is what your numbers look like, the yellows, whatever this ugly color is here. If you leverage data, even the slightest bit, like you mentioned this company which is focusing on its analytics, essentially, of the data, of the traffic that's occurring over a line, to figure out how we charge you. What are the rates that we should charge you? How are you using your phones, and for what? If you're a texter and not a phoner, we're going to charge you more for texting because we'll make more money. That's how they increase their revenues, and that's how they increase their profits. And what we're finding is that all of their investment in technology has a huge return if they focus on analytics. You show this to the chairman of any company around the world, and you don't have to have another ounce of a conversation on why they should be focusing on their data. The question is really never why. The question is how. What problem do I start with first, and how do I go about solving it? We're going to talk a little bit about that so I can get you interested in how you might choose to solve some of the world's problems in the future. You're going to hear the term analytics a lot. You're going to hear it when you hear at Fordham. When you leave Fordham, you're going to hear the term analytics, and there's a reason for it. Because we have this huge data problem, and it exists in every company around the world, every city around the world, every nonprofit organization around the world, does not matter where you go, it exists right here at Fordham. Understanding, for instance, in universities, when a student has gone off course, meaning when a student maybe isn't doing as well as they should be doing based on what we know their capacity is, there's software that exists that we're actually building today that can allow your teachers to intervene and build a course correction plan for you so that you focus on achieving the outcome that you were here to achieve. That's pretty impressive, and that's all done with data. Analytics can do everything from looking at what happened in the past. That's what I call rear view mirror analytics. You're sitting in a car, you're looking in the rear view mirror, everything that happened behind you has already happened. That's where a lot of the analytics is today. Where the cool stuff is happening is way on the top. How do we predict what's going to happen? How do I know what you're going to buy this holiday season? Because the advanced retailers, they know. They know your favorite teams. They know your favorite colors. They know who you're going to buy for your family because they've been tracking that as you're out perusing their websites, and they're tracking your Facebook activities to figure out what you like and what you dislike. So they're watching you. And then also to kind of figure out, well, how do I make sure that when you engage with me, you get the outcome you're looking for, so you come back again? That's the really, I think, highest value part of analytics, and honestly, it's the toughest to do from a technology perspective. It is the toughest to do. And a lot of what you're learning in these classes is the baseline for being able to do this. When you understand business processes, when you understand how to take requirements and turn it into some kind of a valuable technology, when you look at data and understand the components of data that matter and what's the noise that you have to kind of remove from the data, you can get tremendous nuggets of knowledge that can bring you very, very quickly from the rear view mirror analytics to the more predictive and prescriptive analytics. This is the value chain. Every single company is somewhere on this chain. Every single company. They get a little bit of value here, and they get a lot of value there. Can anybody think of a company that's using data in a good way as it relates to you? You're all consumers. Think about a company. Think about a bank. Anybody have bank accounts yet?
Well, for all of their shortcomings, especially for the past couple of months, Netflix uses data based on preferences, based on your prior history, to prescribe which selections you might like most.
That's a good example. Netflix is a very good example. They're monitoring your taste. And they're trying to figure, by the way, they monitor your taste also by the day of the week and the time of the day. They know what you prefer to see on a Friday night versus a Sunday afternoon. They know that. They're watching that. Yep.
Related to what you were saying earlier about figuring out what you want to buy, even more recently, figuring out what your friend would want. There's been a lot of data mining on Facebook, for example. There's companies such as Etsy and most recently Walmart that's using data mining through Facebook's API to basically crawl your friends list and find out what they like, and then they have algorithms that can match and associate their products so what your friend would most likely want based on what they like.
That's a really good example. And Walmart's a really interesting company. Anybody here shop at Walmart? So Walmart's going to open medical clinics. You think they'll be successful? Let me tell you why they want to open medical clinics. Walmart's number one business is their pharmacy. And they are collecting a ton of data about you, about how you interact with them based on your prescriptions. Whether or not you buy generic drugs, what drugs you're buying, what potential chronic diseases you have based on those drugs. They know all that. It's private information. But they view it as a population of data. So they're not looking at me and saying, okay, we know you're on drug XYZ, therefore you have this problem. I know that about Karen Parrish. That's illegal. But what they can do is they can look at all of the population of their consumers and see everybody that's taking the same set of drugs and say, you know what, we got a very large population in this part of the country that's taking drugs for obesity. We have a very large part of the population on this part of the country that's taking drugs for diabetes. We're going to open clinics around the country that specialize in those chronic conditions. It's brilliant. It is brilliant. Let's watch that space, because I think we're going to be successful. So I wanted to begin to give you a little bit of a sense of where companies are actually looking at using technology to solve real-world problems. And we're going to talk about some sticky real-world problems. And these are things that I deal with our clients every day. So Evan mentioned that I have responsibility for the public sector. In IBM, the public sector is defined in the following way. I have all of the K through 12 schools around the world. I'm responsible for any technology that we develop for all universities, all middle schools, all elementary schools around the world. That's education. That's one industry that I have responsibility for. I have responsibility for healthcare around the world. Healthcare in China is fundamentally different from healthcare in the United States, which I just got off a call 2 minutes ago with the Europe team, which is completely different from healthcare in Europe. Night and day in terms of how it's paid for, the type of healthcare that's provided, what is required of a patient in order to get certain types of care, tremendously different. I have life sciences. Life sciences is around looking at DNA patterns. Life sciences is focused on the pharmaceutical companies. What are they doing? How do they make money? What happens when their drug goes generic? You probably heard on the news, Lipitor went generic. Oh my God, big problem. Profits right down in the tubes because they make a fortune when Lipitor is Lipitor and not generic. Big problems for the pharmaceutical companies. I also have responsibility for all the governments. State and local governments like the New York City Police Department, as well as federal governments, defense, which also is included in governments. How do we spend our defense dollars? Do we pay for our military? Do we not? And I have responsibility for an initiative in IBM called Smarter Cities, which is really a focus on taking very mature and old cities and making them smarter, and I'll give you some examples, and some new young cities, like some that are popping up in China almost overnight, and trying to create innovative cities there. So I can see lots of things around the world, and we have lots of problems, but we also have phenomenal things that are happening. And what I wanted to share with you is some of the really cool things, so you don't walk away feeling, oh my God, the world is destroyed. It's not. It's a great place to be, and this is a great time to be in a technology space. Anybody follow technology company stocks? Okay, where's Apple?
They're
393.
393, right. Where's HP?
28.
28, right. Where's IBM?
185.
6? Right. How about Dell? I see all the little Dell computers. 18, right. 18, 19, right.
99 IBM, good job.
Oh, wow, we're getting better. We're going to hit 200 before the end of the year. Don't go buy the stock. That's insider trading. Okay, so the key to my pointing that out to you is because they're all technology companies, and for the most part, those companies compete for a lot of the business that I'm going to talk about. So what you need to be asking yourself is, why are some companies doing so extremely well, and why are others faltering? And I'm not going to answer that right now. I want you to think about that. But part of what you're going to have to do when you leave Fordham is you're going to have to figure out not only where do you want to build a life career, and by the way, you don't figure that out day one. I'm still figuring it out. But also, what kind of company do you want to work for? And some of these technology companies, where many of you might actually work, have history, and you need to pay attention to their history. Some are very good at reinventing themselves. Give me a company of the ones that I just mentioned that's extremely good at reinventing itself.
Apple.
Apple, perfect example. Give me a company that's been around for a very, very long time and is not good at reinventing itself. Microsoft, okay, it wasn't one of the ones that I mentioned, but that's a good one. HP, I would have chosen. And then give me one that's been around the longest that has proven to be very good at changing its business model probably every 25 years. Yeah, exactly. So, we may be a technology company, but when we started, we were a meat slicing company. That's what we did, and time clocks. Then we became a hardware company, then we became a services company, and now we're a software company moving into a solutions company. See how that works? So you want to take a look at the history of some of these companies and figure out where you want to land. Makes a difference, it really does. And nobody told me that when I was first starting out. Sorry about that. That just means there's a meeting coming up. So we're going to talk about 3 industries, and I'm going to be cognizant of time. And you guys are going to keep me smart all the time, okay? Because it's a smarter lesson. We're going to talk about smarter healthcare, retailing, and cities. And I chose these because you all have been to a doctor at some point in your lives. You've all probably been in a hospital, hopefully not for you personally, but for someone. So you have some experience with healthcare. You may have some experience with healthcare outside of the United States. I have. I'll share that with you. You all buy stuff. So I wanted to point out to you some retail experiences of how technology is changing retail. Retail has undergone a phenomenal transformation in how they sell to us. And I want to talk about cities because you live today, or happen to be, whether you are physically living on this campus or not, in the greatest city in the world. And I can say that to you because I've been to just about every city in the world. And there are reasons why. But there are some phenomenal cities out there that are doing just groundbreaking stuff. You should be aware of it. You should visit them if you can. And know a little bit about what we call a smarter city. Because they're out there and they are the cities of the future. And you happen to live in one, and I'll share with you some of the things that we're doing here. So let's talk about healthcare first. In the United States, healthcare is broken very severely, and there's a reason for it. We have a baby boomer population, probably some of your parents, who are moving into a stage of what we call, and they hate it because I'm part of it, elder care. Isn't that awful? I get that little AARP thing in the mail, and I just throw it right away. I don't even look at it, I just throw it away. But that's a very, very large population of people who, for the most part, are dealing with one or more chronic conditions. And the chronic conditions are diabetes. Somebody can give me another one? What would be considered chronic?
Blood pressure.
Yeah, congestive heart failure, which is as a result of high blood pressure.
Heart disease.
Heart disease, yeah. What's one that, you know, the big C? Cancer, the big C, big problem, big C. Obesity, believe it or not, is a chronic condition which leads to very serious diabetes later on in life. So these are some of them. When you have one, life is tough. When you have more than one, life is really impossible. And I just finished reading the biography of Steve Jobs. Has anybody read the book? I highly recommend it. And there's a section in the book that I just thought was absolutely perfect about explaining the problem in healthcare. He had liver cancer. He had he had pancreatic cancer, which led to problems in his liver, which led to problems in his kidneys, which also caused him to not want to eat. He had odd eating habits to begin with, but they were exacerbated by this serious physical problem that he had. And he decided that he wanted to get all of his physicians together in one room so they could talk to each other. Can you believe that? And this is Steve Jobs. You gotta believe the guy's probably got more money than God, and he's probably figured out how to solve the problems in healthcare. These people had never been in one room communicating about his care. And he invited them all to his house in Palo Alto, and he said, here's what we're going to do. You are my nutritionist. You're going to talk to my oncologist. You are the person handling my care about my heart rates. You're going to talk to the person who's, figuring out my blood pressure, on and on and on, for 4 hours. They had never, ever been in the same room. They had never been on a conference call. They had never shared information, and they were all caring for him. That's, in a nutshell, that is the problem that we have in healthcare. And as a result, there are huge costs associated with it, because people are getting all sorts of examinations and tests that they don't need. And by the way, here's a real interesting one. Did you know that 90% of the drugs that people take actually only work on 30% of people? So why do we give them the drug? If it doesn't work on 70% of the population, why are we administering the drug? Think. Tell me. Yes. Make money, good answer, but that's not the right one, but it's a good one.
Liability, maybe?
No? Yeah, close. Yes.
Placebo?
Misdiagnosis.
Yes, that's one of it, misdiagnosis.
Because we don't know who is the 30.
That's it! We don't know who the 30 is, and we don't know who the 70 is. That's the answer. Isn't that sick? We don't know who the 30% of the people are. We don't know that if we administer the drug to you, that it's going to work on you as opposed to working on me. That's a problem. That's a data problem. And that's what the pharmaceutical companies are dealing with. So sure, they make money, except recently, what has been regulated of these pharmaceutical companies is they're only going to make money if the outcome is good. So if the drug works, you're going to get paid. If it doesn't work, you're not going to get paid. You think they want to figure out which of the 30% they ought to be giving that drug to? You betcha. This is the number one thing that they're working on right now. Are you starting to get a sense for how technology is going to start solving some of these problems? These are data problems. These are business process problems. So we'll talk about some very specific ones. I'm going to skip that one and I'm going to go right here. So these are 4 examples that I chose for you. And each one of them has an interesting story behind it. So here's how we're going to play the game. The game is, I'm going to give you the problem. And then you're going to give me ideas on how you might solve the problem. And then I'll tell you how we really did it. Every one of these has a problem that's been solved. So let me pick the first one to kind of get you started. And then you can pick whichever one you want to do. I'll pick my favorite one. Sick babies. This is the University of Ontario. This is baby Caitlin. We named her that because she's fictitious. But this real baby does exist. But she happens to be a fictitious story, and she's a research project that we worked on with the University of Ontario. And here's what the doctors wanted to do. They wanted to diagnose newborn children who might be susceptible to infectious diseases. So if you're a premature baby, the number one thing that we worry about with premature babies is lung development, because the lungs are the last thing to develop in a baby. So if they're premature, their lungs are not completely developed. Therefore, they're highly, highly prone to infection. So these doctors came to IBM and said, okay, here's what we want to do. We want to know which ones are going to get sick. That's what we want to figure out. And so the goal was to try to treat the problem before it occurred, as opposed to they get the infection, and a very large population of these babies do not make it. The mortality rate is very high when they get an infection. So what's one way that you think they could treat this problem? And we just kind of discussed one way a few minutes ago when we talked about the pharmaceutical companies. If you were these doctors, what would you do? Just, you know what? There's no wrong answer. It's just a guessing game. Yeah.
What I would do, I guess, I would find information of previous mothers who were misfortunate and they had a baby who died from this, and then I would study actually that parent's gene to see if there's any correlation, to find all those types of parents and find correlations within those genes, and then if another parent were to come in, I would test that person for the same, that person's parent's gene to see if there's any matches between the two.
Fantastic. So you would look at the mothers of the babies who did not make it, figure out if they had a gene pattern that caused that baby to be premature, go to the moms who have babies in the neonatal unit and test them for the same gene pattern. Very good idea. Probably cost you about $20 million, but it's a very, very, very good idea. You, sir, will be in a life sciences company sometime in your future. I can see it. Great, great idea. Yes. What's your name? I didn't meet you.
Brendan.
Hi, Brendan.
See if any of the mothers or fathers has visited pulmonologists in the past 10 years for some sort of tissue.
So you would look at the parents of the babies and determine whether or not they've had any lung problems. Maybe they have emphysema. Maybe they have asthma. And you would see if there's a correlation. So you're both looking at correlational analysis. Very good. That's very, very, very good. How about if you didn't have any money and you had to try to fix the problem? What might you do? Let me give you an idea. Let me give you an idea of what they were doing. Everybody gets antibiotics. Everybody. Every single baby that comes out of that parent that is a newborn, that is premature, immediately gets 10 days of antibiotics. Now, what did we learn about prescribing drugs? What did we just learn about prescribing drugs? Somebody give me a stat.
They don't work.
Well, A, they don't work on what? 70% of the population, they don't work. So if you apply that, 70% of the babies will what? They'll die. They'll die. 70% of the babies will die. We know that. So that's probably not a good answer. But by the way, that's exactly what was being done. That's exactly what was being done. Let me tell you what they did. And it also costs multi-millions of dollars, what we did, by the way. But it was research. So what we did was we created a set of sensors. So a sensor is something that kind of sits in a room and it picks up data. You know when they put those patches on the baby's chest and they're doing all sorts of EKGs and EEGs? Well, we put a couple of sensors on the baby, not many. Many of them sat in the baby's incubator. And many of the sensors sat in the room. And we measured the temperature of the room. We measured the baby's temperature, the baby's heart rate, the baby's blood pressure. We measured when the baby slept, when the baby woke, when the baby ate. Thousands and thousands and thousands of measurements being taken every second. And through a very sophisticated series of algorithms, that's math. That's analytical mathematics. The researchers figured out within 24 hours what were the actual characteristics of a child that was going to get sick. And they could anticipate 24 hours before the kid got sick that the kid was going to get sick. Then what do? Then you administer a protocol of treatment because you already know that that child is going to get sick. But the treatment isn't antibiotics. It's prevention. So it could be more vitamins. It could be change the temperature of the room because the baby's getting pneumonia, the baby's cold. It could be a million different things. But the focus was on finding the data and looking at the patterns to figure out when that baby was going to get sick. By the way, this hospital is doing it today. Not just as a research project, but in Ontario, they're actually doing this with all the babies in their neonatal units. That's pretty funky stuff. You want to talk about changing the planet and making it smarter? That's pretty amazing. When you think about the mortality rate of infants today, which is very, very high. So let's do another one. See, they built this little thing for me. I just love my marketing team. I get to do backwards. It's not the coolest thing. So let's do, this is another interesting one that you might be interested in learning a little about. This is a European company called EU Resist, and they deal in HIV. That's their primary research. They are a research company, and they're dealing in providing medication to people who have HIV. And they wanted to be able to determine what the best treatment is for HIV patients, knowing that 70% of the treatments out there don't work. HIV treatment is probably one of the most expensive medications out there, so you really don't want to be administering it when you know it isn't going to work. And it's a very painful disease. So you really want to try to focus on, especially for HIV patients, not only the quality of the treatment that you have, but the quality of life that they get as a result of the maturity of this disease. And so they said, we would like to really focus on some of these patients, and we want to treat them on more accurate insights. We want to know more about them so we can treat them better to have a greater rate of an extension of life, so to speak. Because frankly, HIV patients were dying a lot earlier than they should. So if you were them, what would you do? How might you extend life? How might you focus on treating some of these HIV patients? Think about it as a data problem. What do we know, RP?
Well, it could be the trend towards personalized medicine. So we target each HIV patient and come with a protocol for that patient based on the data. So we optimize the treatment.
For the individual.
Yes.
So you're on a really good point. So that's exactly where healthcare is headed. Healthcare in your future, hopefully in mine as well, will be individualized treatment. The treatment will be focused on your particular genetic makeup. In fact, going back to the book about Steve Jobs, that's exactly how he extended his life. He actually would have died a lot earlier. He had every single gene in his body analyzed so that they could determine what would be the appropriate protocol of medication for him individually that would not work on me or you, for instance, RP. So exactly right. But that also requires a tremendous amount of depth of knowledge. That means that every physician has to know every patient individually. It's a huge problem to solve, and right now very, very expensive to do. So one option, for sure. What do we know about these HIV patients? Is there data available on their population? Oftentimes we don't know who they are because that data is kept very highly secret. So what we do is we look at a population of hundreds of thousands of HIV patients. That's what we do. And we do something called population analysis. So here, they looked at 33,000 histories of HIV treatment. So back to the point that one of you said, I'd look at the history and figure out how that's predicting the present. That's exactly what these guys did. But they did it through text mining. Does anybody know what text mining is? You write texts, don't you? And in your text, you have certain keywords that you use all the time. When you write emails, you have certain keywords that you use all the time. When doctors write their notes, they use similar medical terms, and they use similar things to describe an individual. This individual is obese. This individual is in a high-risk category. This individual is in an elderly category. This individual has XYZ results of blood tests. But these are keywords that are relevant to a particular patient who has a disease. So they said if we plop all of those databases of people into one huge database and we pull out keywords about HIV, we're going to learn something about this population. And what they learned, it is unbelievably fascinating. They learned that there are 3 stages of HIV. And the last stage, of course, is the final stage. And yet, there are treatment protocols that are fundamentally different between the first stage of HIV and the last stage of HIV. So when you have cancer, what's the treatment for cancer? Radiation and what else? Chemotherapy. Everybody that gets cancer, radiation, chemotherapy. Radiation, chemotherapy. Sometimes what else? Sometimes surgery. Sometimes surgery. But oftentimes, when we look at cancer patients, the decision is, can we do surgery? And if so, we want to do surgery early. But then, it's always pretty much chemotherapy and radiation, not for HIV patients. The prescription cocktail that is provided to a patient in early stages of HIV is so effective that it prolongs life significantly. So they found that if they could not only identify the population of patients that were early, but also identify it early, they could actually elongate these people's lives significantly because there is no cure. And then when they move into the middle stages of HIV, they change the cocktail, and it's completely changed. Because that population has a very different characteristic set. And they respond to treatment very differently. So it's a completely different set of drugs. And then when they're in their final stages, it's another completely different set of drugs, most often focused on pain management. So when you think about how everybody who had HIV was treated the same way, like we do cancer, right? It's chemotherapy and radiation. We now have been able to take all that data and get it to a point where we can get to more personalized medicine, not exactly personalized, but we're moving in that direction. So, which of you are going to solve the healthcare problems of the world? Because I guarantee you, they're going to continue to be there. I'm trying to solve them. I'm trying to solve them at IBM. I'm trying to get a team of people to solve them. Obama's trying to solve them. There are lots of people out there who are trying to solve this problem. Now, in China, let me explain to you what one of the problems is that they have in China. Their healthcare system is highly corrupt. So the way it works in China is when you get diagnosed, you're sent to a particular physician. And not until you're finished with that physician do you move to the next tier of the physician. Here in the United States, for the most part, if you want to go to a specialist, you go. You go. If you need approval from your primary care physician, so what? You get that approval and you go see a specialist. We're very specialist happy here in our country. We love to go see the specialists. By the way, they're very expensive, but we love it because that's how we were trained. Not so in China. In China, there's a protocol where you're moved from one physician to the next according to your treatment of care and your diagnosis. But every step of the way, there's corruption, which adds to the cost of the system. So what they're really focused on, in addition to trying to provide really good care for the millions and millions of people in China, is to take some of that corruption out of the system and apply it to providing more effective health care. Everywhere in the country, the healthcare problems are different. So if you're so inclined, if you love this industry, this happens to be a very passionate industry for many people, you may want to go think about how can you solve some of those problems using technology. You'd probably never think that a technology company was focused on that. But in fact, this is the largest growing industry in IBM right now because it is such a big, broken problem. Let's take another industry. How you doing? You doing all right?
Yes.
Are you interested in what I'm saying? Do you have any questions before I give up healthcare? Actually, I'm not going to completely give up healthcare just yet, but yeah, sure.
I was just curious as to like the research that you do. What if one of the researches comes out and the data is way too scattered so that you really can't make a educated decision as to what the data is?
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
Data is often scattered. It's often really lousy data too. Data is not always clean. You have to spend a lot of time up front. This is what most clients don't understand. And when you get into technology fields or you work with data, you have to spend the upfront time cleaning it. You have to make sure that what you're assessing is actually valid. It's like when you're writing a paper. If you don't spend the time doing the research, no matter what you write at the outcome, it's going to be garbage. It just is. Because the research gives you the facts to support your argument. Otherwise, it's just an interesting argument, which frankly nobody really cares about. That's what happens with bad data. What comes out might be interesting, but not valid enough to take an action on. So we advise people to spend a lot of time focusing on looking at the data. And the only way to do that is with subject matter experts. You really need to engage your business people. You need to engage the physicians. You need to engage the nurses. You have to have them looking at the data. If I look at the data, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm not a physician. But they are. And they can stare and say, this is the piece of information that makes HIV different from stage 1 to stage 2. They know that because they've studied it. What they don't know is what to do with that data. That's where we come in. We know what to do with that data. That's where technologists come in. So it's a really good question, and it happens more often than you think. And sometimes it's gut. It's gut feel from your subject matter experts that say, you know what, I've studied this, I know this particular disease very well, this is the way to go. And then you test it.
So you really need all the stakeholders.
No question. No. Let me tell you something. If information technology problems get solved by information technologists, they'll fail. They'll fail. Because information technologists know the technology extremely well, but they do not know the business model. It's very, we're on a path at IBM where every single one of our IBMers has to declare an industry major. You know how you declare majors? We have to declare a major. So my industry major is healthcare. My technology minor is analytics. Because I spent 10 years in analytics at IBM. Yep.
My supervisor he's from Russia, and he was a doctor there. So now he came here, he got an MBA. Now GE is trying to recruit him because as a consultant to go in because he has the business knowledge, but he has the doctor.
Absolutely.
And it was he was like if someone comes in nursing, he has some kind of PhD.
Right.
Like he would know. What it is.
Right.
Whereas just an MBA or something.
Right. Data does not replace the doctor. Data helps. You still need the doc. Good point. Yes.
It was a couple of months or a year back on TED. There was a talk about basically this guy who made a platform for medicine, but it's like social medicine, where people themselves, the patients, would basically have an online diary of their experience, all the drugs that they took, which doctor they went to, and basically all that data, the website or the platform used would then make assumptions or graphs on basically tracking. But they also track the lifespan. So if anyone died, I guess a relative or someone would change the status on their site of the disease. But all that data and all that social information, similar to Facebook, that can also be used to basically more efficiently find correlations or a possible best route to finding out solving a problem solution. So don't you think it would be better in the long run to basically open source all this information or make it more available to everyone in a way that more eyes are looking at it, more people see the data? But then, I guess in a way, that's bad for business a little bit because it's not the sole. IBM's not going to be the sole servicer of that. So
IBM's never going to be the sole servicer of any solution, sole sourcer, nor will any other technology company. What you're talking about are called patient portals, and they allow you as the patient to be able to go in and manage your information. It's very, very popular in Europe. In fact, in Europe, they have a chip on a card, looks like a credit card, and all their patient data is on the chip. And it's encrypted so that if you lose it, somebody can't get access to the data. And your point is, well, wouldn't we just open source that? Wouldn't we just make that available to everybody so everybody can help you manage your pain and your care, your et cetera? Actually, the reason that's probably not a good idea are twofold. One, there are privacy issues with the sharing of that data. We live in a country, and by the way, we are far more open than Europe or China. They are very closed when it comes to privacy issues. No data about an individual is to be shared. We share credit card data, birthday data. Not anywhere else in the world is that done. We are really the most lenient. So anything that we did in the United States would never even apply elsewhere outside of the U.S. because we are far more lax about privacy. But that would be an issue. And secondly, you really want a patient to be involved in his or her care. It is a problem that patients are not involved. We're very trusting of our physicians, and we don't really watch what we take and how those things might interact. We're kind of expecting that somebody else is going to do it, but you got to be comfortable with who that somebody else is helping manage your environment. And if you open it up to anybody and everybody, are you really opening it up to those subject matter experts that I talked about earlier who have your best interest in heart? I think there's some balance to it. We're not there yet, but you're going to find more and more that your insurance companies are going to provide you with patient portals, and you're going to be expected to make an appointment through that portal, ask for your prescriptions through that portal, look at your medication and how that's used and how it's affecting weight, height, what have you, through that portal. You are going to be far more involved in your medical care than we were and than my parents were. So watch out, because it's coming, and it's a good thing. You should be involved. Okay, let's do another industry. Actually, I'm gonna spend a little bit more time on this one, only because I want to show you something really cool. So I don't know if any of you saw Jeopardy. I know you guys probably don't watch Jeopardy too much, but I have to say there was a very, very cool Jeopardy program. Some of you saw it, where IBM's computer played against the two champions in Jeopardy. Now, I'll tell you the story, and the story is kind of fun. A bunch of our researchers were in a bar one night, and Jeopardy was playing on the TV over the bar. And one of the researchers said, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we could build a computer that does that? Wouldn't it be cool? Now, what the Jeopardy researchers were thinking was not to play the game. What they were thinking of, wouldn't it be cool if we could crack the code on natural language, which is what Jeopardy is all about. Let me give you an example of what I mean by natural language. What does the word kid mean to you? Anything, yell it out. Kid. A child. What else? A baby goat. Exactly. A child or a baby goat. How do you know the difference? Context. Precisely. So what Watson did was Watson said, we're going to look at words in context, and we're going to focus on how language is spoken naturally. And one of the best games to do that, because it's a game always of play on words, is Jeopardy. If we could crack the Jeopardy code, we could crack the natural language code. By the way, this was a problem that technologists were trying to solve for years, 30 years. So they started building Watson. Watson has more computers than this building. That's how huge it is. And they dumped a ton of data into it, every kind of data they could try. In fact, when the researchers got bored, they decided to dump a ton of medical books into Watson. And they gave it the board exam, the medical board exam. They said, okay, we're going to dump all the medical books into Watson, everything that we know from the internet into Watson, every kind of medical thing from the American Medical Association, every journal that's ever been written, all will be dumped into Watson. And we're going to use natural language support, and we're going to test whether or not Watson can pass the medical board exam. What do you think Watson did? Watson got a 70. Watson got a 70 on the medical boards, never having been to a class, but taking all of that information and analyzing and churning it in the context of questions and answers. So when you think about Jeopardy and you think about it as a question and answer mechanism, we started to ask ourselves, well, wait a minute, maybe we could apply this to business. Well, what do you think the first industry was that we chose for Watson? Healthcare. We chose healthcare. Because healthcare is a data problem, and data exists in multiple forms. You go to a radiologist and you get something that flaps a lot because it's on a big, huge thing, and it's, you know, an x-ray, right? How do you analyze an x-ray? How do you do that? That's digitized information. How do you manage that kind of information? How do you manage all the handwritten information that physicians put in their notes? Who analyzes that? So when we look at Watson, we're looking at trying to solve some of these problems, and we've learned a couple of things. How much time does your physician, do you think, on average, spend with you when you go see a doctor? 6 minutes. 6 minutes to look at you, diagnose you, and provide a protocol of treatment. Doesn't that make you feel good? 6 minutes. Why? Because all the information that they have available to them, they can't possibly consume. There's a new study coming out every single day about something that they should know. It's impossible to consume. So we thought, you know what? If we get Watson to consume it, we might be able to help these physicians figure out protocols of treatment. And that's actually one of the things that we're looking at. Doctors don't want to be told, hey, we can diagnose this for you, which, by the way, Watson can, because they can do the diagnosis. What they struggle with often is the treatment. Because of that 70-30 rule that I told you about. How do I really treat Karen if she has an infection? What's the right treatment? And what Watson can do is go through all of the reams of information on what was reported and the latest study and all the diagnostics about all the historical use of any particular drug and say, this is the way that you should treat her as opposed to him. That's what we're going to be using Watson for. I'll give you a quick example of how it works, because it's kind of funky, and you guys are focusing a little bit on technology. So the first thing Watson says is, okay, what are the conditions? What do we see? Okay, well, red eyes, condition number 1. This goes into Watson. Pain, inflammation, blurred vision, floating spots, and sensitivity to light. Anybody have a guess what the diagnosis might be here?
Conjunctivitis.
Conjunctivitis, very good one. Could be a migraine, right? A couple of things, right? Could be a brain tumor. Okay, so we go from conjunctivitis to a migraine to a brain tumor. But those are pretty much some of the options that we have. Okay, so the next thing it does is it looks at the unstructured data. This is the data that doesn't exist in your text. This is notes. These are medical journals. This is all the external information that exists that you've got to look at those specific keywords. If I'm going to pull out the word kid, what do I mean in this medical journal? Does it mean a child? If I put out the word red eye, what are we talking about? That's very important to understand that, as well as pathology reports. So then it dumps all of that into the computer. And then it says, okay, here's what we think the possible diagnosis is. Uveitis, iritis or iritis, I have no idea, and keratitis. Now, this is the important one. Based on all the data that we saw, Watson is 91% confident that it's uveitis, and that's what you should treat for. And if you do protocols, you can actually get a protocol of treatment for that. And this is all done within seconds. So I'll tell you a story. There's a Columbia University physician who decided, I'm going to test this. When he was a resident, there's a phenomenal video on this, but I can't show it to you because we don't have time. When he was a resident, he was brought into a consult. And he was fairly new. And yet he was an infectious disease specialist. That's what he was studying. And this woman exhibited all sorts of characteristics of clearly a problem. I mean, she was physically ill. And the physicians could not figure out what was wrong with her. They had every specialist you could think of. They could not figure out what was wrong with her. He went in, he did his studies, study after study after study, researched every infectious disease you could think of, researched every characteristic you could think of. Months went by. This woman got more and more ill, hospitalized, in ICU, and she was literally on her deathbed. And he actually came out with a diagnosis that was completely off the wall. I mean, just something that would never have come into anybody's head. And he tested her for it, and he was right. And he saved her life. And it took a total of 4 months. So he took all of the exact same information, all of the physician's notes, all of the clinical research, all of the pathological information and the tests, and he loaded it into Watson. And within 3 minutes, Watson came out with the exact same diagnosis at 97% confidence. So while physicians will probably not use this for diagnosis, they may use it for tough diagnostic issues, ones that they can't figure out. You can just imagine the possibilities of being able to use a technology like this. And if this doesn't solve the world's problems, I don't know what does. So, if you're even doubting, should I study technology? Hell yeah, one way or another. It's going to affect you. One way, it already does. You already beep and you buzz and you've got Facebook and you are living in the most advanced technology in the world using. Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that this, the same intelligence is in the iPhone now with Siri. Mm-hmm. So it's expanding from healthcare even into the hands of everyone that has an iPhone now. That's
very true. Yeah. But I would caution you to say it is not this intelligence that's in the iPhone. Nobody's got this intelligence because you can't afford it right now, and it certainly doesn't fit in an iPhone. But I see your point. The point is that kind of technology is becoming so matter of fact that you're going to have it in your iPhones. You're going to have it everywhere you go. You'll be focused on looking at technology through a different lens. And be aware of it, is all I'm saying. Be aware of it and use it. Use it for good. Don't use it for bad. Use it for good, because that's the key here. All right, let's pick one more industry, because I'm going to... which industry do you want to do? We can focus on cities, and we can talk about the cops, the NYPD. Or we can focus on retail, and we can talk about shopping, since it's the holiday. Retail more fun? Okay, we'll focus on retail. And then later I'll tell you my cop story, just because you won't believe it, because I'm a Bronx kid and nobody believes cops. Okay, so I am a Bronx kid. So here's the thing. Retailers, like healthcare companies, had a huge problem. They did not know who their clients were. They really didn't. They treated you as a large population of human beings. You were either a teenager, or you were an adult woman, or you were an adult male. You were either affluent, or you were middle class. You were in these huge lumps of population. And they would shove stuff at you. They would shove catalogs at you, and flyers at you, and coupons at you. And I'll tell you something, I know you guys don't use coupons, but when I see a coupon come at me for something that I absolutely will never buy, it infuriates me. It infuriates me because that's insulting. That says to me, you have no idea what I'm interested in. None. And I really hate when retailers do that. And I won't shop there. Which, leaves a lot of retailers out of very limited shopping experiences that I have because they all do it. But some grocers got really smart. And they said, if she buys Bush's baked beans, why are we giving her a coupon for Campbell's baked beans? Why don't we just give her a coupon for Bush's baked beans? Because chances are if she comes back and uses the coupon, she's going to buy something else. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. So retailers started to figure out that if they could personalize the shopping experience a little bit more, spend a little bit more time knowing who you are, they could actually increase their profits significantly. And they totally lost their way, retailers, totally lost their way. They missed the web market almost entirely. They almost entirely missed the web market. I remember going to CVS 10 years ago telling them, you need to build a website. Well, they thought I was out of my mind. I said, no, you have to build a website. It's going to be a CVS store on the web. And people are going to be able to go in and browse your merchandise, but they're going to be able to fill their prescriptions. The chairman of CVS threw me out of his office. He said, you have no idea what you're talking about. No one will ever shop online. I'm still here. He's no longer the chairman of CVS. And I'm telling you, retailers, that's exactly how they thought. Why? Because they really felt that they knew you. And they felt that they completely understood how you wanted to shop, what you wanted to buy, and why would they have to know you any more personally? And all of a sudden they started to see something happen, and the banks saw it too. You started going elsewhere. If you didn't like what you got at Target, you'd go to Walmart. If you didn't like what you got at Radio Shack, you'd go buy it at Best Buy. In fact, you got even more smart. You started shopping online, and you started doing comparison shopping. And you'll go with whomever has the best deal, or the best merchandise, or the best service. So retailers stepped back and said, okay, we have a very fickle audience now. They're far more sophisticated. We better figure this out. So they started to do some research. And here's what they learned. We actually did this research for them. 25% of people using mobile technologies are focused on using these technologies mostly for browsing. We still don't have a lot of people who buy on mobile technologies, but you do a lot of browsing. Now, in areas like China, Korea, India, they will buy using mobile technology. And there's two reasons for that. One, they have far more mobile capability than we have. They are far more mature in using mobile technologies. And it is because their infrastructure for their telephone systems is very poor. We happen to have an excellent telephone infrastructure. You pick up the phone, you get a dial tone. We take that for granted. Go to Europe. You pick up the phone, you get nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which is why in Europe and in Asia, the cell phone took off because it was much easier to put up a cell tower than it was to fix the phone lines. So they grew up in a world where mobile technology was like having a third hand. Yes?
In the U.S., the number of transactions for mobile devices is increasing now. This is one statistic. 10.2% of all online Black Friday sales occurred via either the
That is
iPad
correct. And
or the iPhone.
that is correct. And that was a record.
Absolutely.
First time ever. Yes, so this is definitely changing for sure. We're finding that some people are starting to get interested in buying via their TV. Now, Steve Jobs is going to fix this problem soon because we all know that his gift to us was an interactive TV, and that will be coming out sometime probably next year. And if you are an Apple user, only if you are an Apple user, because this is part of his strategy, you will be able to actually interact with all of your iEverythings, and you'll be able to buy things off of your TV. So it's not 1-800, I see the steak knives that I want and I buy them at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about point and click, being able to actually use your TV as an interactive device to acquire merchandise. Kiosks are still very, very popular. I don't particularly like them. I think they're incredibly cold and I don't know, I just hate, I hate the whole kiosk idea that spits out a coupon, but you see kiosks in CVS, for instance. You can look at their catalogs, you can look at all of their coupons, you can buy merchandise via a kiosk. And this is very, very popular in areas where malls are really far away. They can put kiosks in gas stations. They can put kiosks in areas that you will frequent, like a grocery store. And you might be more inclined to buy something when you're buying your groceries as opposed to drive 15 miles to the nearest mall. So in areas where malls are very remote, not in cities, these are very popular. And then, of course, websites, which remain the dominant technology. Now, you pointed out a very interesting statistic because last year, the statistic was still showing that 80% of the population were using websites only to browse. Why do you think that would be? Why would people browse on a website but not buy? Yes?
Security may have been an issue.
Security, right? You're worried that somebody might know who you are. Cyber security. We don't have that. Yes, what's your point? Security, what else? Yes?
People want to try it. It's clothing trial.
Yeah, you want to try it on, right? You want to see how it looks. Looks great on her, but she's like a size 0. What's it going to look like on her? Want somebody back here? You're going to say try it on? Okay,
I
yes?
was going to say shipping was also...
Oh my God, shipping costs more than the merchandise. Who wants to do that? Did they fix that this year? Shipping was free. That's why website purchases were on the rise. There was another reason why people didn't buy on websites. They didn't work. When you actually went and clicked on the buy option, the purchase option, oftentimes it would drop. Because the technology behind the website was very sophisticated. They focused all the technology on what the image looked like so that it was pleasing and that you could, accelerate the shopping experience, and very little on the commerce side, which is I put in my credit card, I make a purchase, I don't wait 25 minutes for the system to tell me whether or not the purchase has occurred. That was part of the problem, and that's since been fixed. So I want to show you an interesting retailer who focused on this in a fascinating way. Let's talk about Sears, and then I'm going to end on Moose Jaw, and I'm doing good. So you guys, Sears, right? Is Sears like a hot, happening kind of place? No. Who goes to Sears? Nobody goes to Sears. Sears started out, believe it or not, they were the number 2 retailer in the world for a very, very, very long time. Behind who was number 1 for a very, very, very long time? Anybody know? Before Walmart? Kmart. Kmart, number 1 retailer in the world, 2,700 stores. That was my account for 10 years. And then Kmart did something really, really, really stupid. They ignored Walmart. They thought their competition was Target. They focused all of their attention on Target, and this little guy in Bentonville, Arkansas, in his truck with his gun was coming up right behind. That's how I used to drive around Bentonville, Arkansas, with a gun, with a rifle. And he would tell everybody about Walmart, this great upcoming place, and Walmart was brilliant. They put a Walmart either next to or directly across the street from every single Kmart. And they did head-to-head competition, and it almost happened overnight. Literally, that's what it felt like. So Walmart became the number 1 retailer, and these guys were number 2. Even when Kmart was number 1, these guys were number 2. What do you know about Sears? If you did buy anything at Sears, what do you think your parents or you would have bought at Sears 10 years ago? Appliances, right? They're food, washers, dryers, stoves, that's what they're known for. What else? Yeah? Tires, automotive. Right? So that's why they were in competition with Kmart, because Kmart was a big automotive shop. Yeah? Tools, right, exactly. What we call in retail hard goods. Soft goods, nobody would buy from Sears. So soft goods are, what you wear. Perfume, cosmetics, which by the way is the number 1 profitable thing a retailer can sell. Makeup, cosmetics. So they decided, okay, we got to fix this. We want, I don't know if any of you ever remember this commercial, they had this whole campaign, The Softer Side of Sears. And it was all about promoting their apparel, their merchandise that you wear. But they really screwed it up because their apparel was horrible. It didn't fit well. It wasn't really targeted toward the market that had the money, which were you guys. It was targeted towards me. Well, I'm paying your tuition, so I sure as heck don't have the money. You guys have the money these days. And nobody enjoyed the shopping experience. You went into Sears and it was like you were going to go buy a tire. Even how they had the merchandise on the floor, it was like you would buy a tire. It's not pleasing to the eye, and it wouldn't excite people to want to shop. So they decided they wanted to do something different, and they went to the web, which is pretty unusual for them. And what they did was they created a very, very interesting experience where you could create an avatar of yourself on their website. You should go try it. I think they still have it up. And you could try on clothes on their website. You can pick your height, your weight, the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, build you on their website and try on their clothes. Their profits, their revenues skyrocketed because they were the only ones that thought about the fact that people wanted to try on clothes. And not everybody had the time to go into the store, and they knew the shopping experience in the store was bad. And that was actually very expensive to fix because you have to redesign all your stores. So they said, well, wait a minute, we got another avenue. This is a totally new medium for us where we can go out and get that part of the consumer population that has the money, that wants to shop, that wants to try things on, and would never go into a Sears store. And we're going to get them to try it on online. And that's exactly what they did. And they've been extremely successful, extremely successful. Now I'm going to give you one more example, all done through technology. And this is my last example for today, but it's, I think, my most fun one. Anybody ever hear of a company called Moose Jaw? I never did. Anybody here into extreme sports? Yar, what do you do?
Snowboard.
Okay, that's pretty extreme, yeah. These guys do like rock climbing, but they climb like, you know, huge rocks. Mountain climbing, they go to like Everest. And these are, we are talking bungee jumping, and these are extreme sports fanatics. And this company, Moose Jaw, focuses only on providing merchandise for those who manage extreme sports, who like to play in that game. I actually have an employee of mine who talked to me about these guys, and he was the one that told me the story because he boxed from them. And so they're very high end, but when you're climbing Mount Everest, you don't want the $9.99 pick, okay? You really don't. You want to make sure that when you put that pick into the side of the mountain, it's going to hold you, right? You don't want the 50% off thing that you put on your waist. You're hysterical, but it's true, right? That's, you know, you're jumping off the rock and onto the rock. And you want the one that's going to hold on to you and carry whatever your weight is. That's what these guys have. And, you know, if you're up in the middle of, you know, some mountain where the, you know, the temperature is 20 below, you want to make sure you got the right headgear and the goggles, and you don't want to be buying that at Kmart. So they decided that they had a very unique customer set, but it's event-driven. Their customers go on one event once a year, maybe twice a year. You know, so these things are expensive, and they didn't get a lot of repeat business. We're trying to figure out how the heck do we find all those other people out there that don't know about us. So what could they have done? We know there are extreme sports fanatics out there. How might they have been able to find out who were the ones that weren't shopping from them? What would you do if you were them? Yeah?
If there are like extreme sports events.
Extreme sports events, right? You might go to an event and show your stuff. It's a very good idea. And they did do that. Brought them a little bit more business, but not much. What else? What's a very common way of making people know that you're out there? Advertise, right? You'll advertise. Well, you know, they did do that. That didn't work too much either. So they came to us, and we said, you know, we got an idea. There's this thing called social networking. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a social networking site for you. And on your website, we're going to give people an opportunity to share their experiences with their friends. I just climbed Mount Rushmore. I just climbed Mount Everest. And there's a response. You did? I'm going to do that next month. What pick did you use? What climbing gear did you use? Believe it or not, this is exactly what happened. The chatter on their site was like nothing they had ever seen before. And their customers became their sales force. And their customers, through this website, drove them to, here, just click on Moose Jaw. You can get it there. Tripled their profits in a year. Tripled their profits, all by providing social networking as a way for people to communicate with each other. Moose Jaw had nothing to do with it. All they did was provide the initial site to their customers. Their customers brought in their friends, who brought in their friends, and that's the story. So if you think that technology is boring, I did not do my job here today, because there is not an industry in the world that isn't struggling with some major problem like healthcare, or some maybe not so major problem like how do you get the right people to use your equipment when you're climbing mountains. There are some significant problems out there, guys. And I'm telling you, there's a technology answer to it as much as there is a cultural answer to it. So get excited about it, get involved. I do have in my deck one thing that I want you to look at, which is pretty much a focus on how you should focus on your skill set. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it with your teacher so that you can get a sense for what kind of skills you should be developing. Because as you start thinking about the classes that you're going to take, what you might end up going to graduate school for, where you might end up working, I don't care if you are at Disney, I don't care if you're at JP Morgan Chase, if you're at Ernst & Young, technology is going to be part of what you engage in. And if you can't turn that into solving problems for the business, you won't have staying power. You won't. So these are some of the things you might start focusing on, and of course I'm happy to help anybody with any discussion that you want to have in any industry, because if I don't know it, I'll fake it, but I pretty much know every industry. Thank you for having me here today.
So it was very nice, and some of us will go for lunch, so get ready for that. And also, I guess I will get the slides, and I will post them on Blackboard,
Yes,
so
I'll
we'll
send them
have
to you.
everything available on Blackboard. And thanks, Karen, again.
My pleasure.
Hope to see you again soon in
Yes.
more classes, because these things are very exciting.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Did you find this valuable?
Yes.
Good. I'm happy to, as I said, talk with any of you. I know it's Friday. Have a great weekend. And for those of you who celebrate, have a very Merry Christmas.
Okay.